So there's a misconception that if you're single, you are incomplete, perhaps damaged, salvaged, and you won't be happy until you find your one. And that is not true. That is bullshit. It is a message that has been fed to us by media and advertising. The truth is, when you're single, you have the richest soil for growth. That's why I created this podcast. And unlike other podcasts, this one is host-driven, not guest-driven. That means I will be rotating health and wellness experts 3 times a week to give you the giant box of wellness crayons, not just the primary colors, so you can start building a meaningful life. It's time to give singlehood a cape. You're in for a treat today. Today's host is Dené Logan. She's an associate marriage and family therapist based in Los Angeles. In addition to her work with clients in private practice, she is a mindfulness coach, a yoga teacher, a tenacious wisdom seeker, and a California soul through and through, just like me. Her and I both have Tupac in us. Biggie was wrong. New York is where you visit. LA is where you live. Okay. She is known for her nurturing presence and authenticity. Dene specializes in supporting couples in finding more fulfillment in their relationships and how each of us can reclaim the aspects of our authentic selves we've been societally conditioned to turn away from. She absolutely loves facilitating group immersive experiences and retreats based around these topics. Dene is also the co-host of the podcast Cheaper Than Therapy. Enjoy Dené Logan.
Well, thanks for taking some time to sit down with me, Nico. I feel like I wanted to talk to you a little bit because you are, well, let me back up. So I'm taking over the Single on Purpose podcast, as I do from time to time, to have conversations. And, I feel like first of all, you're one of my safe spaces in terms of like a friend and a man in my life who I feel like, whenever I think about you, you're like a warm blanket of like safety. And when I say safety, I just mean that like we talk about all the things. And like, even though sometimes we don't agree on things, it's always like safe to hash things out. So I love having these conversations with you, but also, like we talk a lot about like love in the world of dating and all of the things. So I thought it would be interesting to have you on the podcast to talk about some of that stuff and share it with others. But before we do all that, will you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for those who might not follow you who are listening?
Yeah, absolutely, Dene. And again, the feeling is mutual. Like, I just want to reiterate what you just said, that you as well. Like, I think one of the beautiful things about the relationship I have with you is that we can disagree, and in such a thoughtful, compassionate way. And honestly, it's really taught me that is possible to have like enlightened, growth-oriented discourse and still not agree and still have a beautiful conversation and walk away with something tangible. Like, I learn things when I talk to you all the time. So thanks for saying that, first of all.
Well, same.
Yeah. So I guess my background, I've been on the podcast with you and Vanessa. So if anyone's listening to that, you probably know a little bit about my background, but was a pro athlete for 7 years, a pro runner and cyclist, had a big crash in 2019 that left me with a traumatic brain injury, ripped all the dominant ligaments, my dominant right arm. And it kind of turned my world upside down. And I've always really been into mental, emotional, relational health, having took myself to therapy as a young man at the age of 23. And I would say that crash, among other life experiences, such as a breakup, such as losing a family member to death, kind of propelled me towards working in the sort of coaching, counseling setting. And you were one of the people that influenced me too, because I remember having this conversation with you over a year ago, and you were like, "You just got to do it. You just got to do it. Like, you're meant to be doing this." And so right now I work with clients pretty much all over the world. I have a podcast, Starve the Ego, Feed the Soul, of which you've been a guest on multiple times. And then of course, making content on the social medias, just like most folks.
The social medias. I love it. Yeah. It's interesting because I do feel like not long before, but before you made the decision to really dive into holding space for other people, you already were doing a lot of holding space for other people. And you and I would have conversations and I would just be like, God, Nico, I feel like this is a little bit in alignment with what you're meant to do. And it's just always been so clear to me that you have so much emotional intelligence and compassion for I don't know, whatever the experiences that other people are going through. And you always had so much curiosity that I think is what is required to hold space for others in just such a beautiful way. And I feel like, you have been such a gift to me in the space of bringing me into the internal landscape of men a lot of times. My practice is interesting in that for whatever reason, and I think this is just a little bit how psyche operates, it's made up primarily of couples, but then also single women. And so, I work with men, but normally they're either married men or men who are just like, dating and in relationships, but not like a ton of like single men looking for love. And so I feel like I a lot of times will get a lot of perspective that I don't necessarily get about the experience of a man from you. And I think a couple months ago, we were talking about dating and we were like, oh, we should put this on the podcast, right? And so I guess, well, let me back up because we've talked a lot about a long-term relationship that you were in, like your most recent really long-term relationship. Yeah. And then you were back in the space of singlehood and I was in the space of singlehood. And what do you feel like you started to understand about dating post that relationship and being back in the game a little bit,
Oh, that's a really good question.
Thank you.
I think, as we experience more heartbreaks and if we take a legitimate look at our behaviors and our patterns, right? And I mean like try to be as conscious as possible. I think with each heartbreak, I have met myself on a more deep level. Right. And that directly relates to my experience with dating. After my most recent separation, which was in May of 2020, it took me, well, first of all, I went back to therapy, really wanted to look at, how I contributed to the dysfunction of the relationship, how I contributed to the positive things of the relationship on both levels. And as I re-entered after probably about, I would say I didn't really start trying to date till about a year or maybe a year and a half after the separation. It's arbitrary number, but that's just, from my recollection, right? And so when I started to try to date again, I realized that, one, my deal breakers, as John and everyone else says, right? My deal breakers were severely different. It was like the level of importance of emotional availability and emotional intelligence was at the top of the list, whereas before my last relationship, it might have been in the top 5, right? And so I had other things that sort of were reorganized just based on my growth, and so as I re-entered the dating world, I just found that, I was more in alignment with the type of individual I was looking for. And it was less about just physicality or athleticism or intelligence or motivation or inspiration, and more about like, I want to know if this person knows himself on a deep level, right? Because that's what's going to hold us together. Because if they don't know themselves, it's really hard for them to get to know me, even if I show them me, right? And so I think that from that last relationship, perhaps the biggest lesson I learned among so many I learned from that relationship was what I really need in a partner, and so with that information of what I really need in a partner, it helped me enter the dating realm with like being, I guess, more easily able to say no, like not entertain something that I already know isn't for me, but still being curious enough to give someone a chance, get to know them. And also on the other forefront is being better with rejection, right? When people are like, hey, I'm not really, I've had a couple dates, I'm not into it. And I think that, it allowed me to sort of rectify a little bit of the consistent battle with my own internal ego of like, well, my self-worth is, has dissipated because someone doesn't want to be with me, right? Because my last relationship, my partner had left a couple of times. And I think that I'm trying to reiterate this or reorient this back to the dating process. But when I got back into the dating realm, it was just it was an intriguing experience because I realized that the pool I wanted to pick from was a lot smaller. And I think for a lot of people that makes them feel very discouraged. But for me, it actually made me feel more encouraged because as I met friends like you and other people that I love and are incredibly beautiful human beings, I'm like, these people exist, So there is a likelihood and a chance and a probability, in fact, a high probability if I keep putting my energy out there like I am, that I will attract someone that is in alignment with the same values person I am, is their own individual, is interdependent, right? And it's someone that I want to pursue a relationship with, you know, whereas I think before that relationship, I had a more myopic view on what I thought I needed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I love that so much. And I kind of want to circle back to that. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Because the first question that came up for me was, you know, Vanessa and I were talking a couple podcast episodes ago about this article that was being circulated. I don't know if you saw it, but it was like the rise of the lonely single male. And it was like a lot of therapists were talking about it. I don't know if it was like on Psychology Today or where, you know, it came from, but they were basically talking about how in the dating landscape, women are doing a lot of like inner work, and, you know, they're doing a lot of therapy, and they're you know, and obviously these are generalizations, but this is what the article was saying, that they're really struggling to find men that are meeting them there, and that are like, that there's sort of a skills gap in terms of emotional work and emotional intelligence. Right. And I guess I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. And like that there are, I think the article was saying that there is like a certain pool of men that are on the dating apps and like are constantly getting dates. And then there's like, and that's a small pool. And then there's like a really large pool of men who are really struggling to find dates and find companionship. And I know you work with a lot of single men, right? So I'm just curious to hear what even hearing about this article brings up for you.
So yeah, I haven't read the article, but just the initial, like my initial reflection on what you just said, I think that, you know, there's some truth to that, because I think by and by, as a generalization, women, based on our current culture and based on the history of humanity, have been, you know, not only more, I guess, more readily open to experiencing their emotions and getting to themselves on an emotional level, but also encouraged to pursue that a little bit more. Not all the time, again, generalizing, right? Whereas traditionally in most cultures, males, and I don't want to confuse masculine energy with saying male, right? But like men have been told to sort of repress a lot of who they are and to, you know, act a certain way. And I think women have the same thing in a lot of other standards too. So it's hard for me to say like one is different than the other, because interestingly enough, I work with a lot of male clients who will be like, well, where are all these conscious women? Because just because someone writes it on their Bumble or Tinder profile or posts about it on Instagram or has been to therapy does not mean that they are where they say they are.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I think a lot of people, for lack of a better word, are bullshitting themselves a little bit, you know? And I think what I encourage people to do is be honest and authentic about where you're coming from, where you are, where you're hoping to go, and what you're working on, you know? And that's how we sort of find a better match than like, you know, I always envision this as this like used car salesman on most dating sites or even social media, right? It's like, oh, the front of the car, I shine it every day. You know, it's got great coat of paint. It looks like a brand new car. And you walk around the back and like the bumper's hanging off and the license plate is like really dingy and the registration hasn't been updated for 2 years, you know? And I think that we're all like this in certain ways, you know? And when we only show people the front in the initial stages, we're sort of already falling in love with an ideal or a narrative, you know, and not necessarily reality. And so I think that men experiences this too. It's just obviously in a different lens based on societal standards. And I definitely feel for both men and women when they say, hey, I can't find someone who can meet me emotionally or who's open and honest or authentic. And I do think there's some inherent weight on genders in this problem, but I do think it's more of a societal cultural thing where, you know, even if you've gone to therapy, even if you're, you know, working on yourself, even if you're reading these books, I think a lot of times people are really just still scared of being vulnerable and being honest about who they are, the mistakes they've made, and, you know, what they're really looking for. And I think also, not only do we struggle being honest about that, we really struggle to understand what we truly need versus what we want, which is a huge issue for most people in dating, right? Because we're looking for what we want. We're not really understanding what we need.
Well, I mean, you're so smart, Nico. I love that. And I feel like I want you to say more about that differentiation and what are some of the things that you see people thinking that they want that like maybe they could tap into a little bit more of the need space.
I love this. So, you know, it's interesting being I'm on dating apps currently, but when I was, I would see a lot of stuff like looking for an alpha male, looking for someone that's, trustworthy. Yeah, right. I hate that word. Trustworthy, truthful, honest, committed, monogamous, all these things, right? And I think that a lot of people, first of all, are very, very readily, they'll quickly give you what they're looking for, and they don't tell you what they're offering. Because just because you're looking for that thing doesn't mean you're given those things. And I'm on the belief system of we can't ask for something we're not willing to give.
That's right.
Right. And so I think that, for instance, my personal experience, a lot of times when I thought this is what I needed, what I wanted was like, someone I was, very physically compatible with, like very, very, physically beautiful, also like highly intellectual, was independent, financially, and all these other things. And then when I took a step back and I realized what I need, I need someone who's highly empathic, who's very caring, who's in tune with her own emotions. Doesn't mean she has to be a perfect human being, but also can communicate them just like I want to communicate mine, and also it's interesting because a lot of times I think I was looking for a mirror image of myself. I think a lot of people do this when they're really honest. They start, you write their deal breakers down versus their preferences. And I'm like, it looks like you're describing yourself, and then they think about it and they're like, oh, interesting that we we want this reflection of ourselves when like, that's the one thing we really need to work on, And so for me, it was just a writing exercise I do over and over again to check in with myself, is like separating my deal breakers from my preferences or my non-negotiables from my preferences. And I think within those differences, you start to figure out what you need, which I would say are probably more on the deal breaker side, versus what you want, which are probably preferences. And for myself and for most people I work with, I'm like, if these are deal breakers, these are the things that have to be met. And it can't be some 30, 40 point long list, because we're human beings, right? People usually will have a really long list of deal breakers and a couple preferences. It needs to be the opposite. We need to be a little bit more like water in how we approach dating and partnership, because oftentimes like some of the best partners are sitting right in front of our faces and we're ignoring them because of like the lack of polarity or lack of chemistry or something, which I think is equally as important. But, I think sometimes we put too much weight on that, like initial, like, oh my God, I want to jump this person's bones, where I'm like, you have an incredible soulful connection with this person. Like, if you by chance might pay attention a little bit, you might be able to develop sexual intimacy, but that partnership might be way more beautiful than if you met someone on Tinder, Bumble, or Hinge that you think is like super hot, and, you get a couple beers with them and you have great sex. But after that, there's not really much depth there, and not to say sex is important. I think it is incredibly important.
Yes.
But hopefully that's somewhat of an answer, because I think that it's hard for me to say specifically, how to find that from one point in life where it's like, oh, I need to delineate my wants or my needs. But I think it's a process over getting to know yourself better. Then you're honest with yourself at some point of like, I know what I need.
Yes.
I also know what I want. My wants, I can kind of probably shift them around a little bit. My needs, I can't change those things.
I mean, I love that answer so much. And here's what I find challenging, and like even challenging in supporting people in the realm of dating. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think our work is to know ourselves well, so that when we are in the space of getting to know someone, we can just, really respond to the truth of what this is bringing up for me, and know our bodies well enough to like tap into what the somatic response to being in this person's presence is. All of those beautiful things, right? And I find that the dating apps, man, like I feel like they're such a, oh my God, I could go on. I'm like, they're just such a like dehumanizing space of like, well, first of all, if you're someone like me that gets like easily overwhelmed, it's like too much. Like I can't see this many human beings in like the span of 5 minutes. Like my brain's like, But also, there's just so much rational mind, and like I'm such a like feeling person that like I could probably fall in love with anyone if I spend enough time with them.
Right.
But I think there's like, I think you know what I'm saying, but I'm trying to articulate it. It just feels like it removes some of the magic for me.
I completely hear you, Dene. And I think that so many people I work with too, including myself, like feel disenchanted with a lot of dating apps and dating culture. I do want to take a step back though and say that dating apps are merely a symptom of our current society.
Oof,
right.
Say more.
And so just like Instagram, just like TikTok, you can see where our values are put, right? Our values are very, very focused on the front of the window. You know, like, did we shine it? Is, same thing with like the front of the car analogy that I was kind of putting up there, right? And I think it's, the way I see it now is less of a judgmental thing and more of a tool, you know? Like, I think that when you bring up a really interesting point of like, I feel overwhelmed. I think a lot of people do. And I think this is another lesson we need to learn for ourselves, is like, we can use the tool as well as restraint, like put some restraint on ourselves. For a lot of clients that feel overwhelmed, I'm like, well, if you do want to give dating apps a try, like just do it once, like one day a week. You get on for like an hour and chat with a couple people. The thing that I think helps a lot of people, if they work really well on what they say in their bio and their profile and the photos they share, because that, like, if they're really upfront about like, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm offering, it eliminates a lot of the fluff that you might get where, cause you don't have time to like go through all these conversations. Right. And so for me, like being really intentional about what I write, and being really honest about, things I'm working on, who I am, what I'm looking for, like dogs, long walks on the beach, like most people like those things. Like, who are you? Like, who are you for real? And then people are like, well, I don't want to just tell, a bunch of strangers on the internet who I am. I'm like, well, if you don't, you're going to get matched with a lot of other people and you're going to have to filter through all that. And you're going to be exhausted from filtering. You don't really want to filter. You want to get to a point where you're already matching with people that are in alignment with you. And then you can have a conversation and go from there and see if like, you need to meet up in person, if you want to meet up in person, right? If that feels good for you both. And so I'd say like, I totally understand like the feeling exhausted part and the feeling overwhelmed. I do think that like this app culture is here to stay until the internet completely zaps and we all have to be humans again. Because it's just a part of who we are now. I mean, even with us recording this podcast digitally, right? Like it's ingrained in our society. Now, can you not meet someone in person? Like the olden days, I hate to say it like that, but absolutely you can. It's beautiful. It's incredible. Yeah. Do you raise your probability just based on statistics if you're on an app with intention, using it as a sort of informed tool? I think so. Yes. Can you fall in love and have a great partnership and a relationship without it? Absolutely. And so for me, it's just like, there's so many people that really want to meet others. And, especially when you get to a certain age range and you're like, well, I don't really go do a lot of new things, right? I'm kind of in the same communities. The apps are merely an outlet for someone to meet someone new that they might not otherwise not come in contact with, Yeah. So that's how I view it. I view it as a tool more than like this thing where it's like this oppressive cloud that once you get under it, you're just like, oh my God, I feel exhausted because I have all these messages and emotional things I have to respond to.
Yeah. I mean, I think here's the thing. And I 100% agree with what you're saying. And it's funny. How do you say Jillian's last name?
Tarecki.
I think I was listening to the two of you. Like, I'll just be honest, like a little activated, Nico, in one of your conversations. Because I'm sorry. What I was thinking as I was listening to you guys talking about how I think in that conversation, the two of you, and at some point I want to meet Jillian and ask her for myself, but like, you were talking about how there's just like a group of women who get to a certain point in their life and they get like really comfortable being single and it's not healthy. Right. And here's the thing, like, I'm looking at the two of you, frankly, very attractive, people of a certain demographic. And I'm thinking, you two probably kill on dating apps. A lot of my clients, I find, they're in there. They like literally are like it's a full-time job for them and nobody's swiping on them. Nobody's interested in them. Right. And so I feel like that can feel really defeating to hear it's not healthy for me to be single when I feel like I would love to have someone be interested in dating me. And I'm not the demographic. And I don't think, I think that's men and women, but I think that there are a lot of people who are not the demographic that people are seeking to be going on dates with. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that specific clip with Jillian, I think
you're like, today you keep bringing it up. You didn't hear the whole
it's
thing.
Okay. I want to talk about it. I appreciate you talking about it because it's important. I think that, it did get misinterpreted a little bit because I took that clip specifically because I knew it was going to ruffle some feathers, but in the greater context, what was really being said, and if it didn't come off this way, like, apologies on that front, but I think what Jillian was really saying and how I agree with her in this is that, you know, the people you're speaking of are consciously choosing to go out there and pursue dating, which I think is wonderful, right? After a portion of time of singlehood, I think all of us are here for connection, whether romantic or friendship, but go out there and meet new people, right? Fall in love with people, you know, like that's a huge part of being alive. Congratulations. You have that capacity, right? No matter what trauma you come from. And I think what Jillian was saying is like, she was speaking more towards the people that are choosing not to pursue relationships, like consciously saying like shutting things off, shutting themselves off. And it wasn't directly related to apps. It was just directly related to like, you know, when you've been so hurt or so traumatized, all of a sudden like, well, I'm just going to be single because I'm avoiding the risk or the pain that comes with possibly getting to know someone I might fall in love with and I might lose again, you know. And I really think that was what we were speaking to in that context. But in that clip, it sounded like we were basically criminalizing singlehood, which is not what I'm doing, you know, at all. Because I think that, as you know, a lot of people don't stay single long enough and jump from relationship to relationship and just carry this bag of like busted toys, you know, in the form of emotions, and then jumping onto the next person like, hey, here you go, Merry Christmas, you know. And I think that's really what Jillian and I were trying to hone in on that conversation, but we might not have used, you know, perhaps the right like rhetoric in the moment of the clip.
Well, I don't think it's not using the right rhetoric at all, but I'm curious to hear so I've come up with a little bit of a different perspective on love and like what I think a patriarchal society sets that the baseline should be partnered, right? And that especially for women, if you are single, that means that you somehow were not worthy of being chosen, right? So if a woman gets to her like mid 30s or 40s and she has never been married, then society kind of looks at her still, even in 2023, as though like she was defective somehow or like not worthy of something. And what I also see in a lot of married people is that, again, for women, there's a lot about partnership that can be a bit of a raw deal, you know, can be a little bit of like, what am I actually getting out of this? And listen, conscious men like yourself, that is probably, and obviously that's kind of a heteronormative way of holding it. But I think that a lot of times there is a lot that is not of benefit in terms of partnership. And so what I've sort of come to the conclusion of is we should be in partnership when it's justified, but what if single were the baseline? What if I'm single until someone comes along that makes me not want to be single anymore, but singlehood is so amazing and I'm so in love with my life. And, you know, I'll use myself as an example. Like, I don't feel like I'm a lonely person. Like you, tons of people in my life, like make my life really rich with connection. But I think we sort of say that women especially are some, like, from my perspective, are women are somehow incomplete until partnered. Do you know what I mean?
That's interesting. I do hear that. I feel like men get similar things. So even if we look at like someone like Leonardo DiCaprio, like people consistently criticize him for being in his 50s or almost in his 50s or something and dating all these like 23-year-olds and then, you know, dumping them. And they're like, this guy, like, what's going on? You know, he can't hold a relationship. Like he's not married, you know? I feel like, you know, I think men get criticized too, just in different levels. But I do know absolutely women get criticized if they're not in a relationship. I would say that, like, I agree with you though, like healthy singlehood should be the baseline. But to me, when I use the word partnership, it's in the terms of like health. Like it's like, you know, when I don't say partnership unless like it is a functional relationship, you know. If it's dysfunctional, I'm like, well, you just got a dysfunctional relationship. It's not really a partnership, because partnership to me is like we're meeting each other on this and we're working on this shit, right? And it doesn't mean it's devoid of conflict or devoid of arguments or devoid of, you know, pain or suffering, but you're working on it together, right? I think that, you know, I don't think we can like objectively say that human beings aren't here for some sort of partnership just based on our biology. Like we procreate. Right. And so, you know, we make babies, and in babies, that is a partnership. You know, you need a partner to make a baby. And so I think that this even precedes patriarchy, right? It's ingrained in our DNA that we want to have relationships. And I don't speak of like relationship as just of being like romance. You know, I think what Jillian and I were trying to get at is like, you know, don't shut yourself off because of your trauma or your pain. You know, it's okay to be single, but like get back out there when you feel ready. You know, at least pursue meeting other people. It doesn't have to just be for romance, right? Whether it's monogamous or polyamorous or whatever, like open that door again to your heart, because that's living.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're single or in a relationship, like kudos for just putting yourself out there again, right? After you've taken some time to learn from the past one and not just bring the same trauma over, right? I want to always preface what I'm saying, because people are like, oh, like Nico said in this podcast, I should just get back after. I just got out of one 2 weeks ago. You know, it's not what I'm saying, right? But I think we agree in the sense, Dene, that like, you know, I do think healthy singlehood has to be the baseline. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, if you're not okay in your own company, you're never going to be okay in someone else's.
100%. Right. And well, first of all, I would say that like Leonardo DiCaprio might get some shit, but like most people still want to date Leonardo DiCaprio, whereas that is not the case with like 50-year-old single women for the most part.
I don't think Kate Beckinsale, dude, I'll take a date with Kate Beckinsale any day of the week. Kate, if you're listening, like slide in my DMs, please.
It's Kate Beckinsale. I don't even know who she is.
You don't know who Kate Beckinsale is? Oh man.
No, but I'm going to look her up now because apparently she's hot enough for Nico to be all about it. Okay, so there's that. I don't think George Clooney was getting a ton of like negative flack as a bachelor before he got married, but we'll leave that debate for another time. However, I do want to circle back to what you were saying about, you know, healthy relationships are what are sort of life affirming and like feeding our soul. And, you know, I'm curious from your perspective to hear like what that looks like, because I'll be honest, and some of this might be, I don't even think this is like my skewed perspective as a couples therapist, to be honest. Like I see a ton about relationships, and I'm going to speak in terms of like married partnerships in this context. I don't know a ton of people, to be honest, Nico, that are happily married, meaning I know like it is like a societal norm baseline, like facts, like men talk about their woman as the ball and chain who like makes my life miserable. Women talk about like how their husbands are idiots and never help them. That movie and book, Fair Play, was like a phenomenon because all of these women were like the amount of emotional labor that we're carrying is so out of alignment with what men are carrying. And so I feel like, yes, in theory, I would love for everybody to have really healthy, functional relationships. But like, think of the people that you know that are partnered. How many of them do you know are like thriving in their partnerships?
The people I know, I say it's a subjective answer because a lot. A lot, I will say, friends. Because I have, and they're the people I seek to emulate because their relationships are not perfect. They're far from perfect, but they're healthy, right? They're progressive. They're expansive. I think that I agree with you, Dene, that it is extremely hard to find a healthy partnership. But I would say, going back on your first point, we have to have the healthy partnership with ourselves first. So if we create a society or start to progress a society where people start to get to know themselves better, do some more deep shadow work, rectify their childhood trauma, understand their patterns, their preconceived biases, like we start to ripple out and we create healthy relationships through that work. Yes. Right. And so as that expands via a lot of different ways in society, I do think we're in a paradigm shift right now, from like, if we even look at like the end of the 1960s, 1970s, when the Vietnam War was happening, when like there was this huge hippie revolution, I feel like we're on the precipice of something like that right now, because a lot of people are waking up again from a slumber. Yes. And this is how humans work. We go in cycles. We repeat history. As unfortunate as it is, we do the same shit over and over again. We're not doing super novel things, really. We've had Renaissance periods before. And right now, I think we are in a Renaissance period of the human soul. We're looking for meaning, and meaning we have to find within ourselves before we find within another. But to share that meaning with someone else is, I think, one of the most beautiful things on the planet.
I legit could not agree with you more. I'm like smiling so much my face hurts because I couldn't agree with what you just said any more than I do. I absolutely think that's true. And, a little bit, the conversation that we were just having is me like, it's not what I truly believe. Like, I believe that relationships are some of the most beautiful, life affirming, like it's the eros, it's the aliveness. There's something that comes to life, even in the struggle, when we are attempting to work it out and hash it out with someone. And I think offer the most potent opportunity for healing, right? Like we heal in relationships and we have a mirror placed in front of us in terms of what there is left for us to heal. obviously. I believe that is true. It's why I'm so passionate about couples work. But I do think that something that you just said is important in terms of how things have to shift. And I'm curious to hear more what your thoughts are. I remember, I think this was actually in a conversation she was having with you, to be honest, was Dr. Alexandra Solomon was talking about how our grandparents' model of what a marriage and partnership looks like is just not going to work in 2023 and beyond, because we have too many opportunities for instant gratification. We have a need to make meaning versus like, you know, just like we used to sort of be like, I just want to be comfortable. I just want to like, you know, retire and like build a 401k, where people are really looking for something different out of their lives now. And I think it is causing us to relationship different. I'm like, I don't think that was a sentence, but you know what I mean? I think that it is causing there to be a need for us to like really have a different kind of partnership, right?
Absolutely. I think so. It's not to say that there weren't incredibly deep, emotionally intelligent and deep relationships back then in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s, 1910s, whatever, right? It just is evolving because we are evolving, you know? And so we often forget in our incredible intellect here on the planet Earth that we are a species who is evolving still, right? And so as we expand, so does our happenings, and a relationship is a happening. It is a thing, right? It is happening. And so I think that, you know, we just have to be honest. Like sometimes we think we're like this like, and we are an incredible species, but we kind of like zoom in so far that we're just like, oh, like nothing's changing. We're so stagnant. And then if you zoom out, like, you know, I say this a lot, we're like these tiny little vessels on this magnetic rock floating around this giant ball of fire energy in the middle of nowhere. Like it blows my mind. And then we watch these movies, like these Marvel movies, and we're like, oh man, I wish Iron Man was real. I was like, it's happening right now. Like really, like if you really think about it, these movies are literally just glimpses of the universe that exists within like your head, what you can think of, right? And so if there's infinite amount of possibilities within that, regardless of your spiritual belief, you can change like very quickly if you want to be something different, right? And so I think because of that, even though we're so ingrained in our ways, right? We look at patriarchy, we look at misogyny, we look at racism, we look at these sort of baseline of judgment that we've built up in society. It's really just a reflection of our own internal oppression. We're not meeting ourselves and we can't meet someone else. And it's really just a mirror image of our relational dysfunction too. Because when I talk about relationships, I don't always talk about relationships from the outside perspective. It's not like relating to others, it's relating to yourself. You know, most of the time your anger and your pain is because you don't have a relationship with yourself. You know, I can speak from experience. Like I know what that feels like, even on a daily basis still, you know? And I think when we talk about relational evolution, it just follows suit to self-awareness being increased, right? Less of a self-impotent society, meaning like I'm not just focused on myself, like selfishness, but more of like a selflessness. And selflessness doesn't mean codependency. It doesn't mean giving everything about yourself away, but understanding that like, yes, you are an incredibly important, unique thing that's part of this group of incredibly important, unique things. You know, there's not very much differentiating you from another human being as far as your capacity to love, to feel, you know? And so when I come back to that thought process, I'm like, yes, I will slow down to stop this stranger on the street and shake his hand if he's homeless and make him feel like he is valuable, right? Because that relationship is important, you know? Even when I'm stressed out, it's even more important to me when I feel like shit that day, you know, which is interesting because people forget about it.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think to me, what is underneath what you're saying, and again, couldn't agree more, is that we are so conditioned to believe that love and life is about what we can get. And I believe that the fulfillment and the the thriving really comes in the opposite. The more that I fill myself up and focus on what I can give other people versus what I can get from other people, it just feels better, you know, like that thing of what you're speaking about with stopping on the street to see another human, is that is like the space of service. And if I am able to be of service to my fellow human, it's most like selfish thing possible, because it makes me feel better when I get out of my head and into somebody else's experience, right?
Absolutely. The exactly the thing I want to add to, well, I guess your initial question is that, for a long time we've measured the success of a marriage by length of time.
That's right.
And that's a shitty ruler.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good tool of measurement, right? Because time is a human conception, right? The universe doesn't operate on time. We do. We invented clocks because we're like, oh my God, we die. So we need to sort of commodify time to make sure we're not wasting it. Right. And so you can be a relationship and frankly be wasting your time. You can be in a marriage for 40 years and be extremely unhappy and feel alone and feel depressed. And so, I think that we need to stop measuring relational or marital success on time and measure on, do you truly love the company you keep? We all get old and saggy. Will you share a cup of coffee with this person, look into their eyes, and still feel as alive as you did when you first fell in love with them? That doesn't mean it's some fairy tale whimsical thing. You have to work towards building that, right? It's not you meet this person, okay, unlock achievement, good. We played the video game, we're good, we're done, we can put it away. It's not like that. Simon Sinek brings up game theory a lot when he talks about leadership. And I think I've said this before in the conversation with you, but we're all playing these finite games because we will look at basketball or golf where there's a set of rules, a desired outcome, which is usually us winning, score more points, do this thing, we get this result. Relationships are infinite games. There's no ending. So the point of the game is to keep it going, to keep it healthy, to keep giving into it and getting from it as well too. I think when people struggle is when they get in this game that's just not healthy for them anymore. One or both people are done or not working on it, and they just don't feel connected anymore. And let's say that they've done their due diligence and done a bunch of work, gone to couples counseling, is still not getting better. Perhaps they're just growing apart. Perhaps their wants and needs just change. Perhaps they just grew separately. That's okay too. I think we demonize separation a lot in society when we need to understand that sometimes separation is indeed the healthiest option for both people, right? And sometimes you have to separate in order to grow. So I think that when we just measure relational success on time together, it's like, oh, you've been together for 10 years. Congratulations. Like, why are you congratulating them? Like, you don't know if the relationship's healthy. If you know their relationship and it's an incredible relationship. Like, I have some friends who've been together for a long time, and I'm like, man, that is amazing. Like, I see them fight. I hear them, get into fights with each other, but ultimately they've made it through, right? They continue to push through these disagreements, these internal battles, right? They put the work in together as a couple, right? And they both bring it to the table. It's not just like one dragging the other person up. Both of them do it, and that's really, I would say, quintessential to judging relational health.
Yeah. I mean, it feels so exciting to be alive at a time when these are the perspectives that we have. It feels so expansive. And I think that is, to me, the measure of when this relationship is life affirming and I am growing and feeling inspired in this dynamic, right? I think, yes, absolutely respect and just, acknowledgement of who this person is. But if we're not still inspiring one another to grow, and, I think we think that love is about this person loving me, right? I think, and that, like, to me is a lot of times what the challenge is with a lot of the relational content. It's like, find a man who does this for you and this, like, and if he doesn't do this, and it's just, I think, gives us such a distorted view to the point you were making earlier of what our relational work is, which is, how am I showing up, right? Because that's what I can control, right? Like, I don't get to control whether or not someone is doing X, Y, and Z for me, but loving someone to me is, I see this person and I want to rise to be the best version of who I can possibly be because this person inspires that in me. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think equally being able to, fall and be caught as well too, because we are all going to fall at some point, and I think that's one thing that I think a lot of men, for, strong as they try to be, are also wanting to feel like they also can be held, because I think for instance, when we speak of like, traditionalist theory, like a lot of women believe they should be, the guy should be the caretaker. He should be, I'm like, well, men want to be taken care of too. I think a relationship is we take care of each other. We take care of ourselves and each other together. It's a partnership. Right. And so I think that, when I see, women celebrating their partner, I'm speaking heteronormatively, of course, but when I see anyone celebrating their partner, that's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
When I see like, when I hear of like my female friends supporting their male partners who are like, say, get laid off or struggling with something in their family or something, when they, can be a shoulder for them to cry on, not judge them, not think they're less of a man, not think they're, weak for doing that. Because they step into that role of like mothering. And it's I'm not saying like mother your partner. That's not what I'm saying at all, but there's that innate beautiful thing within all women that like you have this, you're a life bringer, right? And so you can caress life in a way. You can caress sort of the emotions and the waves that come with life. And, many men are looking for that space to be held as well, too, just like women want men to hold that space for them, And I think that's one thing that freaks a lot of women out is when like, they see this strong stoic person for most of their life. And then that person, breaks down or crumbles. And sometimes it can destroy a relationship. When I think sometimes that's when sort of the soil is the freshest to plant new seeds and connect on even a deeper level, because you see your partner on what they struggle with, which is an incredible, I would say, it's just an incredible experience, because not many people get to see someone at that level of a human experience, right? And usually it's the people that are closest to us, our closest family members, maybe our closest friends, but for sure, like our romantic relationships,
Yes.
And so I would say, just for me, I would hope that more women as well to understand that, like, men too want to be held in that way, not just the one-sided thing. I think we both, in the masculine and the feminine, through all parts of society, we have room to grow, and we should be growing into each other, not away.
Yes. And I have a visceral reaction to the mothering element, because I think that to me is where, to me, mothering, and this is the challenging thing, is actually an incredibly masculine role. And it's very task. It's very containing. It's very like, I need to hold things down. And what I find, what I think you're speaking to, which is like necessary in the beauty of relationships, is actual intimacy, right? Like I let you see me, but what I find is the dynamic that is so common and really detrimental to relationships is that women do get into mothering roles with their partner, and that really kills the life force, the erotic charge between two people, because, as Vanessa often says, I can want to mother you or I can want to fuck you, like choose one, right? But I think it's tough. And I think this is a tough line for both men and women to know how to battle that. But I think the bigger struggle, or I don't know, the way out of that struggle for me is a lot of times like that. Remember when we were talking about like that conversation with Connor Beaton saying like, your woman doesn't want to like hold your, how did he say it? Like your emotional world for you. Like she wants you to have that awareness of what's happening and then bring it, right? Like not like figure this out for me. I have the capacity to like go inward and like do the navigating of what's happening. But I think sometimes when it's like the chaos of like, I have no idea what's happening, fix it, then it feels really sort of maternal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess I use the term mothering that's why I said like, I don't mean like mother your, I mean, like when I think of mother energy, I think of like Mother Earth. I think of like being held in a way that's safe. Like I'm in like my natural environment. Right. And I think that I actually disagreed with Connor on that comment because I think that he's applying that to men. And I think that like that has to do with all genders, because I feel like a lot of times women will dump their emotional shit on the guy, and then the guy will try to like find a solution or fix it. And it's like, hey, well, you haven't processed your emotions yet. So like you need to do that shit first. Yes. And then we get together and we can like hold space for each other. I think women do that just as much as men do. And so when Connor said that, it wasn't so much with I had a problem of what he said. I had a problem that he genderized what he said to men. And I know he's man talks, but I think when we speak, especially as like counselors, therapists, coaches on the internet, we have to always put the caveat in, right? Because people read it and then they're like, okay. And then they just run with it. And so if you don't write like sort of the loopholes of how people could, whenever I write posts, I'm really trying to think about what will someone interpret this is who is looking at it through their own subjective lens of trauma or experience, because I want to make sure I write for that person too, because I don't want them just to misconstrue what I'm saying and say that like they can just go to their partner and be like, hey, I read this on the internet and you need to stop emotionally dumping on me, and then they do the same damn thing, but because they're talking to their partner who's a man, they feel like they can say that because someone said it on the internet that has a lot of followers, and so I wanted to be careful with sort of agreeing with Connor, because like I think this is the boulder that all of us have to pick up, not just men. Like when I'm talking about emotionally, like, looking for someone to mother me, looking for someone to caretake me, because I know I've been on dates and I've been in relationships with women that do the same thing,
Totally. I mean, it's so hard because listen, if you feel like you do that on Instagram, like bravo, because I feel like the nuance is hard to capture. And I feel like so often people will be like, well, this example. And I'm like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to capture the nuance of humanity in however many characters we're writing about in these little squares. But also, I agree with what you're saying 100%. And here's the challenging thing for me, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. And a little bit, this is why I'm so fascinated by the dance of masculine and feminine energetics, and that I love like studying it and attempting to figure it out. And I don't think that men and women are the same. I don't think that there are, I want to give an example. So like yesterday there was like a homeless person who was like, I don't know what this man was trying to do, but something, and I felt afraid. And I texted my kid's dad and he was here in like 10 minutes and like literally just like had the conversation with that guy and like, but there was so much like exhale and safety and containment. And I was like, God, this is such an example of like the way that like male containment can feel just like really, really like beautiful and lovely. And we're not the same, like I had a very different visceral response to the situation than he did. And I'm curious to hear, one, do you think that's just like socialization, or do you think that's just like some of the innate differences in gender? And I think there are some ways that like, it's just become really politically incorrect to talk about some of the difference. Like there's something like 85% of women, their number one fantasy is to be ravaged by a man and taken against their will. I mean, but that is what like the studies say. And it's like, but we can't say that because, do you know what I'm saying? Like there's some things about like what is masculine energy that is like really arousing to a woman that I feel like we've gotten away from like being allowed to talk about, but it's true.
There are no doubts. I don't care what social psychologist says this. There are no doubts that there are biological differences that influence our behaviors as men and women. I mean, even when you look at like a base level of neurobiology, like someone like Andrew Huberman talks about this a lot, that like, testosterone, estradiol, all these different hormones, they develop different in the womb, right? And so they influence us through birth, and that also influences who we are on a molecular level. And also your brain and your thing is made of molecules, guys. So if those are different, there are differences, right? Hate to break it to everybody, but there are differences between men and women. There's just no denying that. I think that the environment does influence that, right? It's not everything, but it does influence that depending on how you're raised. I think that that's a totally normal response. I mean, even we look at the history of society, is it a patriarchal response for a woman to feel unsafe and like immediately want to call a man? I don't think so. I think that's just like a biological thing, right? I think that as we evolved over time, like men would go out and like, kill things to bring back. Like they would go out and fight most wars. Like not to say there weren't female warriors, there were, but when we just look at broad generalizations over the context of global history, that's kind of, those are the roles we've been shepherded into, for instance, right? And that's why, when you say that, I don't disagree with that. But then when we fall back on like, well, now as a woman, I don't want to step in this, mothering role to my partner because I feel like it's, too masculine. I think that's where there's like a lot of gray area, right? Because I feel like it depends on how we define mothering in the specific context. Because if we're like, well, I'm trying to mother my partner, that seems quite unhealthy to me, right? It seems like very, very unhealthy. But it's like, well, I'm holding this mother energy because my partner is suffering right now. To me, like in my mind, it sounds just differently, right? Because like the quintessential mother energy to me is beautiful, just like the father energy is beautiful. You know, when I'm very in alignment with the Navajo culture, and you know, they believe like Father Sky, you know, Mother Earth, right? They separate these two deities basically on their creation story. And it's really this beautiful way of holding the masculine and the feminine and not genderizing it, even though they're talking about father and mother. It's really these two sort of just omnipresent beings inside of all of us, right? Yeah. And I think that that's what I mean. It's like at some part in your relationship with your partner, you're probably going to have to be Father Sky, right? Encourage, like blossom, like give energy, blow fire into someone's soul, or you're going to have to be Mother Earth, like be steadfast, hold safe space, right? And those are not dependent on whether you're a man or a woman. You can hold both of those spaces depending on the needs of yourself and the other and the relationship. You know, but I think in society, we tend to genderize those things. Be like, okay, if you're a man, you must do this. If you're a woman, you must do this. And like, I don't know, I think you probably should do most of it when you can, you know, for yourself and for another person. And also part of the beautiful thing of a relationship is like, you know, there might be some times, just like you called, you know, your ex-partner to come over. If we look at it in a different perspective, like maybe, you know, a male partner lost his job, for instance, and he just he needs some space to be held. You know, in my mind, I feel like that's the same thing. It's just a different thing. It's like I'm creating a sense of safety for my partner. It might not be physical safety, but it's emotional safety because that's what they need. You know, so I'm tapping into that energy of like being this like safe mothering space, right? Or this safe fathering space. I guess you can use whatever word you want for that.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to like pause and reflect on how beautiful what you just said was, because I just loved it so much. And, you know, first of all, I think because I have so much resistance to the parenting of each other, like on either side, I think, you know, and this is what I think is so challenging. And I find especially, and I will genderize this when I work with couples, I do think that men want just like a linear, like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Right. Like just like, and a lot of this is a dance and it isn't fixed. And sometimes we're going to need to play different roles than we need to play at other times. And we need to have that fluidity, like you're talking about, and be able to be like water in our relationship. And what does the moment call for right now? Right. And I think society hasn't given men a lot of permission. And that's really to be in touch with their own feminine and their own ability to dance with what is necessary in that space. And I think there's something in what you're saying about like, if a man has lost his job, that what I find often is what he is looking for is not to like, because I think there's something in mothering that can feel really emasculating to men a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And there's something in like, I trust you. I trust that this is not who you are. This is a season of what you're going through, and that, that you're going to be okay. And that feels like I'm still seeing you. I'm not putting you in the space of like me caretaking you, but like I'm present with you. And I trust that this is a moment. And I completely agree with you in the need for men to be held just as much as women. And I think that there are still differences in, what that might look like in one of those challenging moments. And again, none of this is fixed. None of this is like, this is the clear way you do it. But I do think where we get into trouble in our partnerships, like across the board, and this is the thing that I will like, the hill I'm willing to die on, is that we just get in the space of parenting our partners way more than is good for us, you know?
Yeah. And on the inverse side, where like a lot of people, like a lot of women will sort of sit in this unhealthy mothering role of their male partner. A lot of men will sit in this unhealthy fathering role of their female partner, where their partner, who might have a lot of dad issues or mom issues, is looking to sort of just be a child still. Right. And I think that I see these dynamics on both sides, and it can be flip-flopped, you know. It could be like the woman holding this unhealthy father space, you know. It's not like this linearity at all, like you're alluding to. I agree with that. But I do think that there's I just view it as like the yin and yang in most things. I mean, I have this huge tattoo on my arm expressing sort of the balance of like, in all things, there is something else, right? And so like when we talk about like, yes, there is, like, you had this visceral response from me using that word mothering. And that's why I threw that caveat. So like, I don't mean like unhealthily mothering your partner, right? Like that's not what I'm talking about. But I think I don't want to be scared Just like I was so scared of using the word God for 12 years of departure from religion in my 20s. I don't want to be scared of using the word mother or mothering because I come from one. I wouldn't be here without one, and so it's a beautiful thing. There's unhealthy mothering and there's also healthy mothering, right? And that's open to interpretation in a lot of ways. And so I think using it as an adjective, I want to be clear that, like, I'm not saying you mother your partner, but you can hold, once in a while, some deeply healthy mother energy, and you can hold some deeply healthy father energy, right? And it is dependent on the needs of yourself and the relationship and your partner. The issue is when we get stuck in those roles and then we cement ourselves in those roles, it becomes a problem, because we're less fluid, and all of a sudden, okay, well, they're just always going to be like this, so then I'm just going to always act like a baby, because they're just going to keep being there to take care of me, and
that's real.
That's not relating.
To the point of what you're saying, like, someone could easily say, my kid's dad rushing over here to, like, help me, like, that could be father energy, right? Like, he came in to, like, handle the situation like a dad might. And
right.
That's true. And I think you're absolutely right that the work for all of us is to be able to be in the dance of both our masculine and feminine, our yin and our yang. Like, that's our work. To do that for myself, and then also relationally, how can I be present with what the moment calls for? Yeah, that's right. You're real. That's real. You're right, is what I meant to say. Yeah.
I think of it. I don't know why this just came to mind, but I think of it this way, right? Like, and this is, again, my subjective needs in a relationship. But if someone were to come into my house, and let's say I have kids, and they're trying to hurt my family, like, no doubt I'm going to fight back because I've been a warrior my whole life. But the woman that's sleeping next to me, she's a warrior too. Like, that's what I'm attracted to. And we're both going to rip your head off. It's not just going to be me. You know what I mean? And so, and I'm speaking about this energetically, like I want, like, someone who's able to meet that energy with me, because, like, if someone's showing up, like, it's not just like, oh, the man's got to take care of it. It's like, no, like, we both love the things in this house, like, these are our children, right? We're going to protect them, right? It is my duty, but it is also yours, because if I'm not here, if I were to fall, you have to pick it up, That's just how this works, right? It's how it worked, back in the day, right? And so I don't necessarily think that's a patriarchal ideal. I think it's a partner ideal, like.
Well, I mean, I'm laughing because I was like, well, this partner would be hiding in the closet. But then, as you said, if something happens to me, like, but at the same time, like, my mama bear energy, like, if someone's messing with my kid, like, I am a
that's
warrior,
that mother
right?
energy. Like you,
totally.
There's no more dangerous creature in the wild than a mother. Let me tell you, dude, go mess with something that has a cub, true. You are not coming back. And I think that there's a real protective nature in that, and I think it's a beautiful part. And there's over mothering. Let's be honest. Helicopter parenting is a real freaking thing, and it's causing a ton of problems. But I think that when we really are able to distinguish, again, healthy mothering from unhealthy mothering, we can sort of start to use that word. Like, my relationship now with God, right? It is not like, I don't use that word like it was used with me when I was young in grade school and Catholic school as an oppressive thought. It's this ever expansive thought that's interconnecting me and all this other life, right? And so, like, I was so scared of using that word, just like I was really, I don't need to use mothering in that way. And I've just, let's say, re-upped my relationship with the words,
See, Nico, this is why I love talking to you, because you're, like, really reframing some of my thoughts around my visceral response to parenting, and I think that is why we need to be open in conversations forever about, like, what else could be true, and that we can just get really sort of fixated in, this is the truth as I see it, and I'm not budging. And I think there's, like, some beautiful truths to what you're saying, and that anything in its extreme version can sort of become a pathology, but there is nuance, and there is beauty in all aspects of our humanity. So I appreciate you so much. And
likewise,
I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with me and with the Single on Purpose audience. So I know you were talking about all the socials, but where can people find you if they're interested in working with you or learning more about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. D, thank you for the plug here. So at that Barraza boy on Instagram. I did have a TikTok for like 2 months, but I had to delete it because
You're off the TikTok?
Yeah, I want one social media thing, dude. I just, you know what I mean? It's a lot of your time. And so Instagram is the only place you're going to find me on social media. You can go check out the podcast, Starve the Ego, Feed the Soul. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, Dene's been a guest twice. They're incredible episodes. Please go listen to them. And then if you're interested in working with me or maybe taking one of the courses I hold, it's www.nicobarraza.com.
Oh, I appreciate you, love. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Dene.
I hope that episode was helpful. Hey, listen, if you want to share your singlehood journey, if you've gone somewhere and come back, if you have revelations and wisdom, please share your story. It's going to help other people. Nothing makes us feel more connected than hearing other people's stories. So just send me the audio of your story, and you could just record it directly from your phone and email it to theangrytherapist@gmail.com. Also, if you want our Single on Purpose newsletter, go to singleonpurpose.life. That's singleonpurpose.life. You will get tools and articles and other people's stories, and also Zoom links to private gathers. So if you want to join our community, go to singleonpurpose.life. Thank you for listening. Be well. We hope you tell a friend. Hey, before you go, I want to invite you to the Single on Purpose private community online. It's off of social media, no ads, no algorithms. We got forums, we got live groups, we got webinars, and we have social hangs. We also have offline in-person hangs happening soon. So check us out. Go to singleonpurpose.life. That's singleonpurpose.life, and I will see you inside.